Good afternoon, Prynawn da, and welcome to NAHT's non-selective hustings events for candidates standing for election for the Senedd within the Neath constituency. My name is Laura Tams and I'm the organiser here at NAHT Cymru, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this NAHT broadcast. I shall run through some brief housekeeping and then pass to our chair for this evening, who will continue the proceedings. I'm pleased to confirm that this event is being simultaneously translated into Welsh. So if you'd like to listen in Welsh, please click on the Welsh option at the bottom of your screen. Our translator should be there shortly. We also have a British Sign Language interpreter with us this evening, so please spotlight as required. We are recording this broadcast, and this will enable people to rewatch and be available on our website tomorrow afternoon. During the hustings, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions of Senedd candidates, and if you would like to ask a question, then please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or alternatively, please use the chat function and these can be read out on your behalf. We appreciate you sharing and commenting on our events on social media, and we would ask that you please use the hashtag NAHT Cymru Pledge. However, we would like to request that if posting photos of any of our digital broadcasts, that you are mindful to not include comments from others which appear in the chat function, and we thank you for your understanding. I now have the pleasure of handing the meeting over to our chair for this evening, Laura Dole, Director for NAHT Cymru, who will undertake formal introductions. Laura.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon to everyone. I would, of course, like to extend a warm welcome to all of the candidates and the virtual audience who have joined us for this non-selective hustings event in Neath. NAHT Cymru is the largest school leaders union in the UK, and we pride ourselves on representing the views of our members in all our campaign and organising activity. Never before have we seen such a crucial time for education in Wales, with curriculum reform, new legislation on ALN, and of course, COVID recovery. We need the new government to engage with the profession, to work with school leaders, listen to them, and together we can build an education system that will allow our learners to flourish. To set out a little bit more about what NAHT wants to see from the next government, I'm very pleased to hand over to our NAHT Cymru President, Karina Hansen, who will say a few words before I introduce the candidates and we begin opening statements. Over to you, please, Karina.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laura. And I'm going to join Laura in thanking you for coming along and listening to us this evening and answering our questions. So we've drawn up a manifesto that I hope you've had a chance to have a look at, with some key priorities for us that we want you to support us with and promote over the coming year. So for our pupils, staff and school leaders, wellbeing is key for us. We're asking you to put wellbeing at the heart of all policy making as we move forward this year, and to consider the impact of policy on wellbeing before it's put in place. It's been an incredibly difficult year for schools and their communities. And while we're committed to supporting recovery, we do want an acknowledgement that it's not just down to schools to support that recovery, but the wider system as well. We want to ensure that the well-being of staff and leaders is put at the heart of everything. It needs to be prioritised. We believe that without that being prioritised, we're not going to be able to enable the well-being of pupils as well. And on top of this, we see a potential crisis in recruitment and retention of leaders, particularly if the right support for well-being is not put in place. The second key area for us is funding. Many of our priorities are interlinked within the manifesto, but we believe that if we don't ensure that the adequate funding and fair funding in education, then many of the key changes taking place at this time are just not going to be achieved well enough. We need to ensure that we can adopt and embed a world-leading curriculum, but without the adequate funding, it's just not going to happen. And we want to call on you to ensure a fair funding system in Wales, that rather than the postcode lottery that we see we've got in place at the moment. Our third area is accountability. Again, linked back to funding. We want Welsh Government to carry out a review of the middle tier. We want to ensure that there is a review there to look at the value for money and the impact of the consortia model. We see some regions functioning really well and benefiting from the model, but it's certainly not the picture across Wales. We're also calling on you to support a break from Estin inspections this year. We were meant to have our break from inspection last year so that we could develop and prepare for the new curriculum. Obviously, we ended up managing a crisis instead, so we didn't really have a break. But we want to ensure that we give schools the time they need to develop and prepare for the curriculum, the time they just haven't had really this year. We feel very strongly that schools and staff need to be given time to recover from the past year, and just an acknowledgement, we're not back to normal business yet. We're still dealing with the impact of the ongoing pandemic. You know, we're all still in bubbles, we're still managing some difficult situations in schools. The fourth area for us, I've just alluded to it, is Curriculum 2022. COVID has had a huge impact on our ability to plan and develop the curriculum reform. We need time now to consider curriculum development and recovery alongside of that, and schools need time to do this. It's not about a quick fix intervention, but long-term, well thought out evidence-based plans that are going to support curriculum reform in the long term. So we're calling on a delay for implementing the curriculum to allow schools the time they need to plan and prepare for that change. And most importantly, to engage with our pupils and school communities about the curriculum. Curriculum is meant to be sort of context-based around our own school communities. So it's important that we have the time to do that with our communities. And then the final area is ALN reform. Again, schools have been hindered in their preparation for the change needed for this. We need Welsh Government to recognise the need for some substantial investment in this area for training and support for schools. And alongside this, a recognition of the role of the elenco in schools. At the moment, it's not one that's considered in the Teachers' Terms and Conditions document. We think it's a vital role that must be recognised and then funded appropriately to the responsibilities outlined in the new bill. So there we are, that's our manifesto, our key priorities. We hope that you will support us by signing up with our pledge. So thank you for listening to that, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say around education. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. So thank you to Karina for setting out NAHT Cymru's 5 key areas of our manifesto. We hope you've had an opportunity to have a look over them. And as Karina said, we encourage you to sign our NAHT Cymru pledge to work with the profession if elected. The aim of the event this afternoon is to allow candidates in Neath to set out their views on the important issues that you think face schools, and to give us just a little bit of an insight into your vision for education. It's not meant to catch anybody out. It's meant to have a conversation around your views. We're really keen to hear what you've got to say. So to start this afternoon's event, I'm going to ask each of the candidates to spend just a few minutes, up to 3 minutes, introducing themselves, just telling us a little bit more about you. And then we will turn to NAHT Cymru member questions that have come through before the event, and any questions that come through during the broadcast. I'm going to turn to candidates in no particular order, just as I see you on the screen. So I'd like to ask Green Party candidate Megan Lloyd, first of all, please, Megan, if you could just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and make any points you'd like to make about education. So over to you, please, Megan.
You're on mute.
I'm terrible at Zoom, my apologies.
Okay, it's gonna happen, that's fine, it's normally me, so no.
So my name is Megan Poppy Lloyd. I'm the Green Party candidate for Neath, on top of the regional list for South Wales West. I joined the Green Party as they are the party that has and always will put the oncoming climate emergency at the forefront of policy. The Green Party have recently released our most ambitious manifesto to date, and education is a massive part of that. We believe in streamlining social and environmental policies to create a cleaner green Wales that not only tackles the climate crisis, but creates a happier and healthier society at the same time. And education needs to be at the centre stage of the social aspect of policy, and listening to school leaders, staff members and pupils is of absolute paramount, and utilising their expertise and experience is of paramount importance to the Green Party. Teachers and school leaders know how to run schools, not politicians. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that it is possible to decentralise education. The Green Party manifesto promises access to electronic devices for all children that need to learn from home, and access to a structured programme of work if they are unable to attend school, while also starting a broadband revolution to ensure that every learner and educator has efficient internet connection to facilitate learning and working from home. After the pandemic, I think we can all agree that increasing the availability of mental health care and cutting waiting times is something that we can all agree is absolutely vital to ensure that schools receive the support they need to recover from this particularly trying year. Ending the closure of small schools, which are not only secure learning spaces for pupils, but vital community hubs, is also one of our key pledges to the education sector. Finally, the Green Party will scrap tuition fees for every initial degree, democratising education at every age, ability and level. This is not only beneficial to learners, but ensures that those who want to train or retrain in an environmentally or socially beneficial sector are not punished with debt and a loss of well-being. Finally, as someone with both dyslexia and dyspraxia, supporting and enabling children with additional learning needs is so very important to me. Students deserve the most suitable and highest standard of support available, and those delivering this support need adequate pay and support themselves. Thank you very much.
Megan, and thank you for starting us off this afternoon. I'd like to turn now to Plaid Cymru candidate Sioned Williams, please, Sioned.
Go, and I'm off mute. Thank you, Laura. Well, I'm very pleased to be here because my father was a primary head teacher and a proud member of the NAHT. His party trick would, when we used to have visitors, he would put his branch chain on and come and amuse us all, so that he was some very grand figure. But I know he was very, very proud, a proud and active trade unionist, as was my mother, who was a member of the NUT, or the NU as it is now, and she was a primary school teacher and taught special needs children. I work in higher education in Swansea University, but I've worked very closely with the primary and secondary education sector as chair of governors for 5 years in Ysgol Gymraeg Pontardawe, and currently a parent governor. So for over 15 years, I've seen some of the challenges, successes and struggles that have been within the education sector. And I want to start today really by paying tribute to Wales's school leaders who have had such a challenging year, from dealing from the effects of the needless mess and trauma of the A-level results last year, and as a parent of an A-level student who received 3 different sets of results, and as someone who's on the clearing lines at Swansea University with tearful, confused prospective students, I can attest firsthand to the damage that did. And I want to pay tribute to the incredible way school leaders have dealt calmly, swiftly and effectively with the weekly, sometimes daily adaptations needed to deal with the effects of the pandemic. So as a parent and especially as a governor, the dedication, professionalism and above all care shown by our school leaders for their pupils, their staff and the wider school community has really been exemplary, and something I think that Wales should be exceedingly proud of. And it's ongoing, isn't it? I think this is what we need to remember. You know, adapting and carrying out the assessments that have changed this year, planning, implementing recovery, dealing with all the wider effects of the pandemic on the whole school community is a long-term task. And it's a task we must understand and we must support. So as you can see, education is one of my personal key areas of interest. And for Plaid Cymru, education as a means of creating opportunity and inequality of opportunity is key to building the fairer, greener and more prosperous Wales that we want to see. And it's not just about recovery. It's about a new plan to flourish. Now isn't the time for increased pressures, but for increased resource and increased support and a better focus. So what we would do, well, a Plaid Cymru government would boost the workforce, would reduce class sizes and aid education recovery. And as a part of our goal to deliver the best start in life for every child, a Plaid Cymru government would extend free school meals to every child in primary school by the end of our first term. Free school meals we know are failing to reach many of those who need them most in Wales. And the Child Poverty Action Group found that half of children in poverty in Wales are missing out on free school meals, and that's over 70,000 children. So we feel this must be addressed, because we all know the benefits of a free school meal are about more than just stopping a child go hungry. It's a regular, nutritious meal can improve a child's performance, their health overall, and thereby offset some of the injustices and inequalities caused by poverty. And as a governor, I have discussed many times the plight of those families who were in need, who were not eligible for free school meals. And I think a universal measure would end stigma, because we also had parents in the schools I've been governors in who would not claim, even though they were entitled to, because of that stigma. And we would ensure no child, of course, in Wales then goes hungry. Again, as a governor, I know staffing levels and workforce retention is an issue in nearly every school. So Plaid Cymru was employ 4,500 extra teachers and crucially specialist support staff in schools across Wales by the end of our first term. We think that teachers have had a particularly difficult time during the pandemic and have, as I said, worked wonders to ensure our young people continue to receive an education regardless of these challenging circumstances. But we know that currently 1 in 3 teachers are quitting the classroom within their first 5 years. And I would think after the strains of the last first year, that may even get worse. So a Plaid Cymru government would address this by not only making funding available to recruit more teachers, but to improve the offer for those already in the profession. So education is the key to our future prosperity as a nation, and a Plaid Cymru government will ensure every child in Wales, whatever their postcode or background, will have the best start in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sioned. Thank you, lovely to hear from you. Over to you now, please, independent candidate Stephen Hunt. Stephen?
Thank you, Laura. Can I thank both Laura's and Karina for the kind invite this evening. Can I firstly say before my 3 minutes start that I have very poor connectivity where I am living, so apologies if I shut off my camera or lose connection during the hustings, but it's out of my control, unfortunately. Right, my name is Stephen Hunt and I'm an independent candidate for the Neath constituency seat for the Welsh Parliament. I've lived in the tiny village of Seven Sisters all of my 64 years. I married a local girl and have 3 grown-up children, 2 still living at home, I might add. I am currently the chairman of governors at Blaendillaeth Primary School and also a governor at Ysgol Gymraeg Blaendillaeth. My daughter is a teaching assistant at Ysgol Gyfun Castell Neath. I don't consider myself a career politician, but more of a community activist, and I have served as a community councillor for nearly 20 years and as a county borough councillor for the past 14 years. Being an independent candidate, I am able to commit to your pledges and the 5 principles laid out by NAHT Cymru straight away. There's no need to speak to any political party or its executive to make a decision, and I have already posted my commitment to this on my own social media pages. I'd also like to congratulate NAHT Cymru on what you have already achieved, where I've watched a number of your hustings and it seems you've had a cross-party support for these pledges already. Obviously, as you mentioned in your opening address, whilst it's encouraging to see the support from the candidates, The reality and challenges is for them to be delivered or start to be delivered. They will need to get financed properly, and that will be the obvious challenges for those elected to the Senedd in this coming Friday. I honestly hope, as on all other Estins, that the positive comments from all the candidates, whoever is elected from across Wales, take these pledges very seriously and work with NAHT Cymru and other partners going forward to try and deliver them. I fully understand after reading the manifesto how important this is for the future of educational needs for our children and young people across the whole of Wales. Lots can be done as to reform education with head teachers and teachers at the forefront of decision making. Because what are politicians? Usually a Jack or Jill of all trades, rarely experts. They may take advice from civil servants and occasionally expert advice, but it is often disregarded in favour of party policy. Well-being, lots of emphasis in my opinion still needs to be put on the renewed focus of the mental health and well-being of school leaders. A commitment that well-being is at the heart of all policy making, of which NAHT already recognised. An acknowledgement by the Welsh Government that well-being in schools is a shared responsibility, of which I totally agree and support. SEN, now ALN, special educational needs, now additional learning needs, sorry. I would 100% support the principles and understanding for additional learning needs reformed so that it can succeed. These must be significant, there must be significant investment in training and support for schools. Also recognising the major role and funding support that is also needed for local government, who will also be playing a major part in delivering any reform that is needed so as to improve the educational standards that we all need for all our pupils going forward. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for your opening statement. We look forward to hearing more from all of the candidates. Last but by no means least, Jeremy, over to you, please, for your statement.
Laura, diolch yn fawr am y cyfle i gyfrannu. Diolch am y croeso i'r drafodaeth. Thank you for the invitation to participate. I'm Jeremy Miles. I'm the Welsh Labour and Cooperative candidate in this election, and I've been the Assembly member for Neath for the last 5 years. And one of the certainly the most rewarding aspects of that role has been the opportunity to develop relationships with most, I think, of the schools, both at a primary and secondary level in the constituency, and to see at first hand the extraordinary work of the teaching workforce and school staff in improving the learner experiences of our children and young people across the constituency. As a member of the Welsh Labour Party and the Welsh Labour government, I mean, I think what we have seen over the last decade, really, under Welsh Labour-led governments is, as many speakers have already mentioned, one of the most ambitious and far-reaching reform programmes in our schools, but it also in other parts of our education system, and it has made a real impact on the experiences of learners and on qualification levels right across Wales. So I think we can together be rightly proud of that. I think the challenge in the next Senedd term is going to be to embed that reform, and in particular the reform of the curriculum in our schools. And I'm really very, very proud of the Welsh Labour commitment to that curriculum. It's one of the votes I'm most proudest of having cast in the last Senedd. But I also know, alongside that, from speaking to teaching staff, both in primary and secondary schools in all parts of Neath constituency, that the last year has been unimaginably tough. Karina mentioned in her remarks at the start the impact on well-being, both of staff and the workforce, but also obviously on pupils. And our commitment is that we will do everything we can, if we return to government, to repair the damage done over the last year to the lives and life chances of our children, but also to recognise the pressures that has brought on the teaching profession to deliver quite an extraordinary service over the last year for our young people. And we are absolutely committed that nobody is going to be left behind in our schools as a result of COVID. Our approach has, I hope you would acknowledge, and will continue to be, to try and make sure that change is delivered and improvement is delivered in a way which is collaborative and works together with our workforce, but also with children, young people and their parents and carers as well. We've seen, an improvement in A-level performance, which has been pretty significant, I think, in the last few years. We've seen in the last Senedd term the introduction of a curriculum, the reduction in the average infant class size. We've passed the legislation for additional learning needs support that needs implementation in the term. We've continued to reduce the cost of the school day for our pupils by extending financial support, the first government in the UK to guarantee free school meals up to 2022. And on top of that, the school holiday enrichment programme, which we're obviously committing to continue in the new Senedd. We've supported the growing demand for Welsh medium provision as well, and embedded the acquisition of Welsh language skills in the new curriculum, and investing as well in teaching and professional development of teaching workforce, I think has been a really significant step forward. In our manifesto, we're promising that to make a reality of the commitment that no one is left behind, to fund an additional 1,800 tutoring staff for as long as they are needed to make sure that is delivered. We'll continue to invest significantly in the fabric of our schools and colleges by investing 1.5 billion in the 21st Century Schools programme. We will work with schools in the way that we have to help them meet the mental health challenges that many young learners are facing. We've done some of that in the last Senedd. We will certainly build on that in the new Senedd if we're re-elected. And we absolutely are clear that part of the delivery of the curriculum involves also reducing unnecessary bureaucracy in schools and on school leaders to make sure they have as much capacity as possible to focus on what they do best, which is lead in our schools. And we regard that as fundamental. We'll continue to invest in pupil development grant. Other parties, I'm afraid, will not make that commitment. We think it's essential. And as I've mentioned, we'll continue to invest in our school holiday enrichment programme. I think one of the issues which has been very clear in the last few years as well is the pressures that the supply teaching profession have been under. And we will certainly want to develop a sustainable model in the next Senedd term, working with the profession to make sure that fair work is at the heart of the role and the experience of supply teachers as well. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you to all the candidates for their opening statements. I'm now going to turn to some pre-prepared questions that have been sent to us by NAHT Cymru members. None of the candidates have seen the questions, but as you can imagine, they're questions that all relate to education and they all relate specifically to the key asks of our NAHT Cymru manifesto. So the first question is going to be around funding. So I think you've all pretty much touched on the issue of funding, and Karina made comments around the manifesto itself, which is talking around a commitment to a review of school funding. So some of you may be aware that the Children and Young Persons Education Committee in the last Senedd produced a report that said we needed to have a look at how schools were funded. Luke Sibieta, a leading person in the field, was commissioned by Welsh Government to carry out that report, and that report was published before Christmas. The report said what we already knew to be the case from our members across Wales, is that funding formula used to give funding to schools is a mixed bag across Wales. There's no two local authorities that do it the same way. Schools are not given the same amount of funding. And as far as we are concerned, we are looking to end the postcode lottery and make sure that schools are properly funded and that schools across Wales have some consistency. Of course, there will be regional differences, and we recognise that, but as a baseline, we think that schools should be funded fairly, and we should end the postcode lottery. Our question to candidates is, would you back NAHT's call for a funding review? That's our question. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, please, Sioned.
Yes, is the short answer. We completely recognise that education in Wales suffers from a funding crisis under the Labour Welsh Government. And yes, that research you referred to, we know that school funding was cut 9%, or £500 per pupil in real terms, between 2010 and 2021. And yes, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been on many finance committees where We've had anxieties. I've had to go and see directors of education because we know that there is absolutely no way we're going to be able to make our budgets balance and provide the basic standard of education needed by our schools. And as you say, similar schools, that's what really strikes schools as unfair. And anybody who's been a governor will know this. You experience these different levels of funding, even within the same authority sometimes. You know, schools with similar levels of deprivation often see differences of about 35% in spending per learner between authorities and even within authorities, even after accounting for learner and school characteristics. You know, there can be some authorities can spend up to about £300 more or less than the national average. So I've seen, as I said, firsthand where choices we know will impact our schools adversely have to be made when we see other similar schools benefit from sort of these variable and very opaque funding formulae. So Plaid Cymru would promise to review that. We want to bring an end to this postcode lottery of school funding, and we also, crucially, I think, want to deliver a 3-year budget for education so that schools and further education settings can better plan and utilise their resources. And I've seen again as a governor how this would be of enormous benefit, because often we're counting on last minute grants to drop into the budget. We're never sure when they're going to arrive. Sometimes we're not even sure when the local authority budget is going to hit. And these different rebates that are given for different things, the goalposts shift all the time and make planning very, very difficult, even within the one financial year. So we're saying let's have a 3-year budget where we can really, especially in this current situation, recovery from COVID, but also planning forward for the new curriculum. We think that would be of great benefit to our schools and to our school leaders. So we also want to make sure funding reaches the front line in an effective and timely manner, as I said, moving away from certain specific grants. And the extra funding we have allocated will allow more schools to give them more capacity for this curriculum development and for special projects to plan forward. So those are the things that we would like to do around school funding.
Thank you, Sioned. Same question to you, please, Stephen. So just to recap, so NAHT Cymru is calling for a review of school funding. Is that something you would support if elected?
Yeah, the short answer again from me is, of course, I would. Sioned made a number of points that I recognised and good points. I didn't have the questions, so sorry, I don't know if I missed them before this hustings, but I'll do my best to answer them. I am a local councillor or a county borough councillor, so I know where the budgets come from, and they are late at times and they are difficult to manage when we got to distribute them to the schools. I think Jeremy, in his own role, you know, the Barnett formula, I mean, we talked about that for 20 years. We need better settlements to our local government, to our local authorities, so that we can deliver the budgets that are needed, particularly in the interest of what you were mentioned here and your own manifesto. Everything is financed. However, on the point of money, it's not always entirely reliant on finances, of course. I mean, I think it was Damon McGarvey, one of your members, regional secretary, I believe. We can work on improving a formula. Should we wait until more money appears in the system? If additional school funding does subsequently appear in the near future, well, yeah, we can work on it when we have the money, but do we stand still before then? I don't think we should. But money is key to everything. As far as budgets to the schools go, it's important they have the money to produce and do the job for the education of the children. There was one point I wanted that was key to raise, and I've forgotten it for a minute. If I can remember, sorry, but yes, funding is essential. I will be supporting your call. It's just that if I remember, give me a moment then perhaps to come back after the other speakers, because there was something that was key I needed to say about the funding to local government, really, who distribute it to our schools. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem, Stephen. Just to let you know, you haven't missed an email. We prepared the questions, but we didn't share them with candidates beforehand. So we're putting you all on the. We're putting you all on.
Apologies. All right, thank you.
All right, you're okay. No problem. Can I come to you next, please, Jeremy?
Yes, of course. Well, school funding is obviously kept continuously under review for the reasons that you've given, Laura. And I think one of the things that I would say, one of the most important things I think that we have done as a Welsh Labour government is to make sure that, bluntly, the deep cuts that we've had handed down to us by the UK government, given the mechanism that Steve referred to there, the Barnett formula mechanism, that those deep cuts that we have experienced, if you like, in terms of the Welsh government budget, doesn't curtail, if you like, the life chances of people in schools. That's been a clear commitment from our point of view. We've ensured that every part of the education system gets the funding that it needs to succeed. I think we'd all like to live in a world where we knew what our funding was going to be in 3 years' time, but that is not the reality of the way our system works. I mean, it would be much preferable in a way that we all had clarity into the future. So I think, whilst it would be desirable to be able to do that, it's just not the reality that we live within. What I would say is, in addition to that, the manifesto we've published contains a number of very specific commitments in terms of funding. Some of them I talked about at the start of my comments, because delivering the policy objectives that we all share has a number of different funding components to it, and so I hear what other candidates say. It isn't as simple as simply saying, well, the top line figure is the figure that is the only relevant figure. There are commitments to other funding streams into schools which we think are important and should be continued. So, for example, the pupil development grant, pupil preparation grant, and others. And we are making clear commitments in relation to those areas, in addition to what I've just set out. So I think that whole picture needs to be looked at. But you have our absolute commitment that we will do everything we can to make sure that all parts of the school and education system are funded to make sure it has what it needs to deliver the success we want for our young learners.
I have remembered the point I wanted to make.
Right, Stephen, I will call on you once we come to the next question, okay? And you can make the point.
Thank you, Lord.
No problem at all. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for your comments. And the same question to you, please, Megan.
Same answer as my fellow candidates. Of course, we agree with a funding review. I'm going to be completely honest. I have not got the level of experience as my fellow candidates. I am not a governor. I'm not a sitting MS. I have only really left education a short time ago myself. So I am still learning about these issues. So what I've done before the hustings is contact my friends who are teachers, and I've asked them about their concerns and how they feel funding is potentially being mismanaged. And one of the main issues that came up is the discrepancy in safeguarding funding for ALN students, and that what should be coming out of a strictly council budget is not enough to cover the needs of the students that have been rightfully introduced to mainstream schools that deserve that support. And if that learning environment is suitable for them, they deserve to be there. But the budget is being, the support that they deserve is being carved out of the school budget. And what's suffering are subjects like the arts, the ability to be able to form concerts. So that, for me, that has to end. You have to, if a service is available within a school, it has to be adequately funded. And the Green Party are committed to listening to educators, listening to governors, listening to school leaders, and you guide our funding policy, because at the end of the day, as I believe Stephen said, politicians aren't teachers. Actually, Sioned, do excuse me, that's not true in your case. Politicians frequently are not teachers. We are not involved in the education sector. I'm a chef. So we need to be listening to you and letting you guide the funding decisions that you feel are necessary to improve the future and improve the chances of our young people.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you. And thank you to everybody for your comments. would like to say that if anybody is joining us and is part of the virtual audience, please feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat function, or raise your hand and I will call on you to ask the questions to the candidates directly. So we're going to stay on the theme of funding for a moment, and we're going to talk about the role of the middle tier. So for people that don't work in education or not familiar with the education system in Wales, we have local authorities, we have Welsh Government, and between the two we have the middle tier, or the education consortia as they refer to. The idea behind the education consortia was to have a collaborative approach across regions in Wales to drive school improvement. The idea was to have that, and to go hand in hand with local government reform, so that we potentially wouldn't have 22 local authorities doing things 22 different ways. Now we have the regional consortia, but we didn't have the local government reform. So now we have local authorities, we have Welsh Government, and we have the education consortia that sit in the middle. Now for us, for NAHT members, we are concerned around whether or not that money that funds the education consortia is being used to the best of its ability, and would it be better off being spent on frontline services, frontline schooling? So we are asking for a review to see whether the education consortia that operate across Wales are offering value for money. So what we're looking for from the next government is a commitment to look at that. Does it do what it was set out to do? And if it doesn't, is there a commitment from that government to make the change? So that's the question that we're looking at candidates to answer. And we're going to start with you, Jeremy, this time first, please.
Look, I think it seems to me the middle tier needs to command the confidence of all parts of the system. Obviously, it's important given its objective, given its roles, that is the case. And I do think there is a task to make sure that middle tier works in harmony, as it were, with each other, that we avoid duplication and so on, and that we have a very clear set of expectations of all parts of the system. So I do think, and I hear from speaking to teachers in schools in the constituency, that there are occasionally questions around that. So I do think that those principles need to be ones which embed the work of the middle tier. Whether that needs a kind of the formal review that you're calling for, I'm not sure myself, to be honest. But clearly those principles ought to be ones which drive the system, as it were, drive the middle tier. And I think if they did deliver that, then I'm sure teachers would recognise the value that middle tier delivers.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Same question to you, please, Stephen. So the middle tier that sits between Welsh Government and local authorities, would you support our call to review that to make sure it was operating and giving the best value for money?
Yes, most certainly. Of course, you have to look at all bureaucracy in a way that they value for money. I mean, we've done that in local government already and removed one of the tiers that supports schools in Neath Talbot within our own local authority. Can I just quickly go back to the point I missed? But what I was referring to with the budgets to the schools, governing bodies and so forth, finances, I believe, are provided to Welsh Government for educational purposes, but a proportion of it is occasionally diverted elsewhere. And that was the point I was going to try and make. I believe that all money, well, if it's not true, it's not true, but I believe that all money that is meant for education should be ring-fenced and delivered for that purpose, all of it. And no money is given not to the education when it's meant for that in the first place. That was the point I was going to make from the last one. Jeremy can correct me if that's not true, but that's what I'm led to believe, that it's diverted. If I can, Jer, before you come back, if I answer the second question, Laura, if you remind me of it again, sorry, I'm showing my age here, but
no problem.
Jeremy threw me there.
No problem. We'll come to Jeremy in a second. To see whether or not you would support a review of the middle tier or the education consortia in Wales, and whether or not it offered value for money.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, certainly would. I mean, it's important that when money is, as Jeremy also recognised earlier, with the money that comes down from Westminster government, and they work very hard to try and get better Barnett formulas and more money. That all money is precious, so therefore any waste, and I believe there's a lot of waste in Welsh government currently, should be looked at in that way, and particularly any bureaucracy, anything that's tiered through Welsh government in any capacity really, should be looked at if there's a money saving plan, and therefore then that money may be redistributed at priorities. Maybe education, which not maybe is a priority as far as I'm concerned. Health and education are the two priorities. I would suggest they are both priorities for the Welsh Government and Jeremy also. So yeah, any wastage, any bureaucracy, anything we can remove that's not working should be removed, and the money saved and put into this particular school budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Jeremy, I will come to you quickly to just allow you to address the point that Stephen has made. If I can just ask you to keep it brief and keep it directly to a response to what he's just said, please.
Sure. The Welsh Government's budget is in real terms less than it was 10 years ago. So the notion that waste has not been squeezed out of the system is just not realistic. And secondly, if Steve's point about education budgets being passed on from Westminster to schools in Wales were correct, there would be less money coming rather than the level of money coming at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. If I could just remind Sioned and Megan of the question. So this is a review of the middle tier. Would you both support a review of the middle tier? I'm going to come to Megan first of all, please. Megan. Oh, Megan, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yes, of course, I would support a review of the middle tier. I think if there is money to be saved with something as precious as the education budget, if it could be reinvested into pupil welfare and staff welfare, then if that's something that is possible, that's something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed urgently. So yeah, I think this all, for me, it fundamentally comes down to listening to teachers, listening to school leaders. And if they feel if they feel a situational system is not fit for purpose, then that needs to be reviewed. And, you know, the more we can do to provide funding for pupils, which at the end of the day is the priority of education, then the better. So that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And the same question to you, please, Sioned.
Yes, well, we agree with the NAHT's call to reform. It's in our manifesto. We think that money being spent should be actually seen to be benefiting the teaching and learning we see in our classrooms. In some areas in Wales, we've seen a better degree of success than others, but it is very uneven. So yes, there has to be accountability from schools, but we think that the school leaders' time can be more efficiently spent, not worrying about unnecessary and ineffective bureaucracy, and we need to make sure that any public money spent on the middle tier has to be spent effectively. So we would be looking to streamline the middle tier, including local authorities, the consortia we've spoken about, universities, Estin, WJC, Qualifications Wales. These are all things that can form that middle tier, and we will bear down on unnecessary administration and bureaucracy, try and produce a more effective use of resources, because we feel that unnecessary bureaucracy is currently disrupting really what teachers are there to do, which is teach, and what school leaders are there to do, which is to lead.
Thank you very much, Sioned. And I should point out, I'm sure candidates are already aware that Neath Talbot Council has already opted out of education consortia. So make of that what you will. I won't pass any comments on that decision. I'm going to move us on quickly to conversation now around the new curriculum. So anybody who's engaged with teachers, spoken to school leaders over the last few years, you will know that educationalists are very passionate about the rollout of the new curriculum. We know that education reform is needed. We have a profession that is geared up and ready for the challenges and opportunity that curriculum reform will bring. Our question, if it's right to say it's a question mark over the new curriculum, is around timing. So it's around whether or not now is the time, given everything that schools have had to go through over the last year and are still going through in terms of COVID recovery, is now the time for the rollout of the new curriculum? And also, if candidates are elected, are they committed to the new curriculum? So they are our two questions. Is now the time to roll out a new curriculum when schools are, quite rightly, concentrating on COVID recovery? And if you were a member of the new government and the new Senedd, would you be committed to the rollout of the new curriculum? I'm going to ask Megan, I'm going to ask you first, please.
I think the new curriculum is pretty ambitious, and after the year that staff and pupils have had, I personally don't think it's exactly the right time to roll it out that quickly. Pupils need time to recover, staff need time to recover, and our teachers and school leaders already do an incredible job with what they know they can do. So for me, it makes more sense to allow people to recover in a safe space, in a comfortable space, something that they know they can achieve, something that they know children can manage, before introducing a new curriculum. So if I was elected to the Senedd, I would personally ask for I would talk to teachers, ask when they felt the best time to introduce it was, and even talk to students and ask them whether they're comfortable with learning a new curriculum when some of them, if you were in year 7, if you started year 7 at the beginning of the, you were only in school for 6 months before, you were only in comprehensive school for 6 months before you were removed from that environment. Would you feel more comfortable with a slightly more structured routine that teachers know how to deliver? So that would be, yeah. And then I agree with the new curriculum. Personally, if I had my way, I would make politics a mandatory part of the curriculum. I think it is absolutely insane that we learn about the kings and queens of 500 years ago, but our children don't understand how the electoral process works. And those children become adult voters who are disaffected voters because you don't engage in a system you don't understand. You just have to look at the de Hont method. I studied politics for 3 years and I still have to remind myself how it works. How are you expecting an entire country to utilize a voting system that is not fit for purpose and is not understandable unless you are educating children from the age of 11 on what their rights are and how they activate those rights? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. And the same question to you, please, Jeremy. Oh, you're on mute.
Inevitably. Yes, I cast my vote in favour of the curriculum. I'm very proud of having done that. I think it's genuinely transformative in the lives of our young learners. I was very disappointed that only half the Conservative Party and no members of Plaid Cymru were able to support the Welsh Labour's position on this. I genuinely think that was a step backwards. But anyway, on the question of the introduction of the timing of it, I, in my own discussions or conversations, if you like, with teachers in the constituency, it seems to me some think that there's a case for, pausing, and some think that actually now is the right time to do it, not least because of the sort of changes in the kind of creative way that people have had to engage with the challenges over the course of the last year. So speaking personally, I don't think the case is made for a review. And I think the bar would be set reasonably high for that, in my own view, because if our judgment is that this is the kind of curriculum that we think is in the best interests of our learners, then that suggests we should get on with introducing it. But I do want to say very clearly that I think there is a case for pragmatism in how we go about that. And there's a case for making sure the pace of taking it forward is absolutely cognizant and reflects the challenges that schools have been under in the last year, which have obviously been immense. So the notion that you could simply pretend that hadn't happened obviously clearly is not right. That will absolutely need to be taken into account in how the curriculum's taken forward. But my own view is that we need to make a start on it if, as my party certainly passionately believes, it is the right way forward for our young learners and for schools in general.
Thank you, Jeremy. Same question for you, please, Stephen.
Thank you, Laura. I think Megan made a number of good points, and so has Jeremy, really. I think the timing is probably wrong. And again, we've been speaking all night here tonight in reference to who do we listen to, who are the best people to have a better understanding of when we take forward any policy or legislation or any other reform. So I again would urge Jeremy and whoever's the leading the country to listen sometimes. I've spoke to head teachers, obviously, and governing bodies and so forth. And my message is clear that it isn't the time. That's what they are telling me. They are saying they need more time. The teachers are overworked. Mental health is playing a huge role in teachers. Some have to go off school, not just because of COVID. So are they prepared? Extra work, curriculum has been changing for the past 2 years. There's been changes so many times that even the teachers are being a bit bamboozled, if I'm honest. But obviously a curriculum is needed. I'm not making reference to the curriculum itself. I think it is a good curriculum. However, it's the question that you asked, is it the time to now embark on this major situation? Then it probably isn't. But when do we? That is also then, when do we make a start? Because to deliver it may take months, so if we delay, maybe then things will change again. So, but lastly, we must always remember those that we ask to deliver it. We got to think of those, they're the people. It's easy for Welsh Government to make all these decisions and then go, here you go, get on with it. It's not as simple as that. So I would urge the governments and whoever's there to have this consultation with yourselves and other leaders in education so that they do make the right decisions for this particular curriculum going forward. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Stephen. And the same question to you, please, Sioned.
Thank you, Laura. Well, Plaid Cymru recognises that the pandemic has had a major impact on schools' ability to prepare and develop the new curriculum. And we want to make sure that teachers have the time and resources they need to prepare and access as well professional development to implement the curriculum effectively, because it's got to be got right. It's a huge change, and we do have to make sure that there is time for the curriculum to be done properly, to understanding any new training required. Estin, we've just been speaking about, need time to adjust their methods after the last year. Everybody's sort of running to catch up a little bit now, all these bodies that would be involved in monitoring how the new curriculum is bedding in and how it's being applied properly. Estin, their staff to be trained and ready, don't they? So, this isn't about kicking change into the long grass, but it's just making sure that the change is delivered effectively. And also taking properly into account the wide-ranging and deep and varied effect that COVID has had on the school system and on the people who are working in the school system. So Plaid Cymru believe that a pause is an entirely sensible thing to do at this point. And so we support the NAHT's call for no statutory curriculum for this academic year, 21-22, while schools concentrate on the post-COVID recovery and then have time to prepare for the implementation of the new curriculum. It's true that Plaid Cymru didn't vote in favour in the Senedd for the new curriculum because we thought there were many things missing. One of the things that Megan alluded to, the Electoral for Reform Society have written very powerfully on, is it's so non-prescribed that many things can simply fall through the gaps, and political education is one of those. And as all my fellow candidates must surely admit, when we go and knock doors, trying to help people understand the different layers of government that affect their everyday lives, education being one of them, is a challenge. I have no idea why, you know, in the United States, they have civics lessons. This is, you know, we all have to learn maths. Why can't we learn about the system that controls our lives, that determines our futures? And I think that's one of the thing, of course, that Plaid Cymru were concerned about was the lack of the prescription for learning about Welsh history. So those are the reasons we thought there were things missing. That's why we didn't think it was a good piece of legislation, but we have it now, and we are excited about the opportunities it presents to transform our education system, you know. But I think that, we need to make sure that it's implemented effectively. So we are very pleased about the way it'll foster a greater understanding of mental health and well-being, with physical education as a core element, and you know, the history and stories of Black and ethnic minority people, which we think we're very welcoming to. But we also think that there needs to be more investment outside the classroom as well, especially after the year we've had, you know, thinking more about extracurricular activities, adventure learning, you know, study visits, drama and music as well. Those things mustn't be lost either.
Thank you very much, Sioned. Thank you. We are very quickly running out of time. I do want to raise a point. It's not directly the question that's been raised in the chat function, but I think it's an important question to ask in principle. And I'm going to set the scene and some parameters for candidates before we venture down this path. So there has been a lot of discussion in the constituency about plans for a super school. So that is a local authority decision and not necessarily within the remit of a member of the Senedd. I would like to have some views from candidates on what you think about super schools in general, but I would like to urge all candidates to respect anyone that is not on this call to be able to defend themselves or answer questions directly, because I certainly don't think it's fair to make reference to anybody who's not on this call. But I am very keen to hear what members have got to say about the principles of super schools, given that it is such an important and topical issue in Neath at the moment. I hope I don't have to step in to stop anyone. I hope I've made it clear the question, and I hope I've made it clear the parameters that we're looking for, because we want to talk about super schools and we want to know what you think about them. That's the question. That's what we would like you to contain your answers to. So I'm going to come to you first, please, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. It's obviously an emotive subject, especially here in Neath and Port Talbot Council. So I must be very careful in how I address the response to this question, being a county borough councillor. However, I would like to say that 24 first century schools is an excellent project. They have a place to play. They certainly give excellent education going forward. However, we can't or mustn't allow Welsh Government or local authorities to decide on what communities want. Now, the point I'm making here is quite a simple one, really. The investment from 21st century schools and the money provided from Welsh Government, then match funded by the local authorities across Wales to deliver these schools, is something that is happening. Consultation takes place, but the consultation sometimes, and this is an opinion of mine, without prejudice, is not listened to. The consultation is then delivering the 21st century schools where communities do not want them. Now, I would make a plea here to Jeremy, if he's re-elected, or to the new government of Wales, is that you need to relook at the arguments of why community schools. I live in Seven Sisters. I got 4 community schools in the Delice Valley. There's also community schools elsewhere. And I'm not going to touch on the recording because, as I said, that would be dangerous territory. However, the point being made that these community schools have no place to play is ridiculous. The arguments are that they haven't got the money to maintain them, and they haven't got the money to make sure they're sustainable for teaching. But if the teaching ability of those in the schools are first class, and the results are first class, why would you want to remove that school? So I would say that investment from Welsh Government, the multi-million pounds they give to the 21st century schools, they only need to give a fraction of that for maintenance and to look after these particular schools. These schools play a part in the communities. They are a hub. They are essential for those living there. There's so many other things I could go on. I know you're running out of time, so I'm not going to do that, and I give other candidates the opportunity. But you picked on a subject I probably could talk for 2 hours on. But I would simply say they are a good identity of a school. They are excellent educational premises. However, it don't fit all. Let's leave it at that. I believe there are community schools in all of our communities, if that's what the people living there and the teachers and the residents want. Thank you, Laura.
That's great, thank you. Same question, please, Megan. So just to recap, super schools, what's your view? So a through school, and if you're from the area, you'll know that there has been much debate about super schools.
Super schools are obviously, from what I've seen on social media, what I've had constituents say to me on the doorstep, an incredibly emotive issue. I personally think there is a massive role in small community schools, and the Green Party manifesto is dedicated to ending the closure of small community schools. As Stephen said, they aren't just brilliant academic institutes, they are community hubs. And after a year of complete and utter isolation for many of us, just being able to chat with parents, guardians on the doorstep of on the school gate must be incredibly refreshing for people. The other issue that I would bring up is an issue of personal experience. I went to Dwyrafelyn before it was turned into a one school site. It used to be one site in Longford, one down in Neath Abbey. And I don't have any of the experiences of terror of going to comprehensive that most of my peers did, because the oldest person in that school was, as you go in at 11, the oldest person was 13. It was still intimidating, but from the stories that I hear from my friends of, 16-year-olds throwing 11-year-olds in bins, I experienced none of that. So I think that if we can distance learning and distance age groups, that's something that that's something that's really valuable, and it shouldn't be sacrificed to the altar of economics. What's more important to our society? Well-adjusted children who are feel safe going to school, or what for me seem like factory farms for education.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the same question to you, please, Sioned.
Yes, well, I agree with Stephen in that I think one of the things that is most depressing for me as a fledgling politician is that people lose faith in politics when consultations aren't meaningful. The whole point of a consultation is to get the view of the community, to raise issues and address them, address concerns, and adjust plans and listen when needed. And I think all too often what happens is that things like the investment that the 21st Century School Programme can provide is used as a cover for an agenda to create change in the way that a certain party or a certain council or a certain government don't want to do. And I also think it's very important to say that it shouldn't be one size fits all, because, for instance, I've been campaigning here in the Swansea Valley against the proposed plans to shut 3 community schools in order to create a primary super school. So this isn't the through 3 to 18 or 3 to 16 model. This is to create a primary super school by closing 3 primary schools in the area. And basically, the parents of those schools were told that there was only one way to, the 3 schools were lumped together. There was only one way to get investment, and that was by building a new school, and there was no money available for any kind of repairs. Well, we know now that that isn't correct. So people lose faith. People lose faith in the system, they lose faith in their politicians, they lose faith in their council officers when they are told something because an agenda is being pushed and that they're not listened to. So, I'm a parent governor in Ysgol Gymraeg Ystlyfr y Brodyr, which is a 3 to 18 school. There, the primary school was amalgamated with the comprehensive school within the same village. So that worked. And so I think that if there can be successes with those models, with the model of a super school and also with the model of using a 21st century school to create new school premises. But it can't be a one size fits all. Every community, every school is completely unique. I was on the call with the NEU union addressing this very matter about a month or 6 weeks ago. And there were people there from Powys, from Gwynedd, from Carmarthenshire, from Pontypridd, from Cardiff, as well as Neath Talbot. And what struck you was that every single person's story was different in regards the circumstances of the school, the role it played in their community, and what kind of investment could be suitable for their school. So I think that's what needs to be looked at, as well as recognising as well that budgetary constraints aren't all, or budgetary, can't think of the word, budgetary, I can't think of the word, the fact of putting the budget first, basically, prioritising budget isn't always the best way to go when we're considering education. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sioned. And
could I just add one point in that I'll absolutely kick myself if I don't mention?
Hang on a second, Megan,
Okay,
because
thank you.
not Jeremy, and he's back with us, so I don't want to lose him again. So I want to give him an opportunity to make a comment. So just to repeat the question, we're still on the same question, Jeremy. So you haven't missed anything. It's just in principle the question around super schools. We're really keen to hear what you have to say. Oh, I think we're struggling to hear you, Jeremy. Maybe try turning the camera off. Maybe that might help. I think you're saying poor connection and you've frozen on our screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give you a moment to see if you could reconnect to us. Megan, I'm going to come to you back really quickly, but we need to keep this brief.
It is a really quick point, but like I said, I'd kick myself if I didn't mention it. One of the things that we really do need to look at with super schools is the air quality around these schools. If you look at primaries and secondaries in London, the rate of asthma in younger children is exponentially higher than it is in children in our rural schools, in our small local schools, where people can walk to school. So my personal issue as a Green Party candidate with super schools is, what about the planet? What about the air quality? What about the effect on children's health if they are surrounded by a pollution cloud, because the only way to accessibly get to them is for your parents to drive you? So for me, if a super school is being built, that's something that needs to be addressed. But in conjunction with that, you need a solid public transport infrastructure for every child in that school to be able to utilise. Otherwise, what we are saying is we are happier for our children to live in a pollution cloud.
That's great. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
That's okay, no problem at all. We seem to have lost Jeremy for a second. If he comes back to us, we'll happily go back to him. On that point, I think Laura's raising I can see Laura waving a hand. Laura, did you want to, have you had anything from, hang on, I can see Jeremy's making his way back. We'll just give him a second to see if he can hear us, or more importantly, we can hear him. Hi, Jeremy, can you hear us? No, okay. What we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to our NAHT Cymru President, Karina Hansen. Karina, if you could make some closing statements, some comments from the views that we've heard from the candidate, and if Jeremy comes back before we finish, we'll go back to him for the last question. Thanks, Karina.
Okay, thanks everybody. Really interesting to hear your comments and your views around education. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of the points there. Most of you agreeing with us to make a review of the consortia. I mean, our concern really is that it just seems to be a very unfair system across Wales at the moment, because obviously we've got quite a disparity between the effectiveness of that consortium model, but we don't just see that as the middle tier. There are other elements that we want to be reviewed as well. So it's really a calling for a review. We're not necessarily saying to stop, but just to look at the value for money. And on that value for money, very interesting conversation there about your the super schools and the approach that you've got within your constituency there. It's very sad really to hear that the decision making is around funding first and foremost, and not the discussion around what's best for children. I think that for me would be the discussion that I'd like to hear, but unfortunately it was all about funding. So it just goes to show that issue around funding and education is a real one, and one that we need to be bringing right to the fore. This is the future of our country. The curriculum, it's really important. It's what's going to make the future work for Wales. So I'm just hoping, again, I'm going to make another plea that you will support our manifesto, support the pledge that we've given out to you, and a final thank you again for your views and for answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Yes, just for me to finish off and extend the thanks of NAHT Cymru and all our members across Wales for the candidates that have attended the hustings in the Neath constituency this evening. We really value your cooperation and your input. We're really pleased that you took time out to take part in the event today and momentarily step off the campaign trail to speak to us and our members. We wish all candidates the very best of luck for the election this week, and we look forward to working with the successful member of the Senedd. Thank you very much for joining us, and good evening.
Thank you all. Dabo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just thank the BSL interpreter? It's I have the reason I'm wearing these is